The rejected sacrifice. Melody Thornwick had always considered herself remarkably unremarkable. At 26, her greatest achievement was maintaining a spotless delivery record for Galactic Express, dodging asteroid fields and navigating hyperspace routes with the same casual efficiency most people reserved for morning coffee preparation. She certainly never expected to end up bound with ceremonial ropes, standing at the mouth of a cave that reeked of sulfur and ancient mysteries. The villagers of Drathel had seemed nice enough when she'd landed to deliver their monthly supply drop. They'd welcomed her with smiles, offered her their finest meal, and insisted she stay for their traditional celebration. Melody should have been suspicious when they kept refilling her wine glass and asking oddly specific questions about her family lineage and whether anyone would miss her if she disappeared for a while. Now, as the ceremonial drums echoed behind her and the village elder pushed her toward the cave entrance, Melody was beginning to piece together that she'd stumbled into something significantly more problematic than a delayed delivery. "Great Valdris," the elder called into the darkness. "We offer this sacrifice in tribute to your magnificence. Accept our gift and spare our village another year." "I really think there's been a misunderstanding," Melody said, her voice echoing off the cave walls. "I'm just here to deliver packages. I have very little nutritional value and I'm probably too stringy to make a good meal." A low rumble emanated from deep within the cave, followed by what sounded like the scraping of massive claws against stone. The villagers behind her began backing away nervously, which Melody took as a very bad sign. Then the dragon emerged. It was magnificent in the way natural disasters are magnificent, beautiful, terrible, and absolutely capable of ending her existence without breaking a sweat. Golden scales caught the firelight as it moved, each one the size of dinner plates. Its eyes, ancient and intelligent, fixed on her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Melody had faced down space pirates, navigated through solar storms, and once successfully delivered a package to a black hole research station where time moved backward on Tuesdays. But staring up at 20 tons of legendary predator, she felt her knees go weak. The dragon lowered its massive head until they were eye to eye. Its breath was surprisingly minty. Apparently even interdimensional creatures practiced good oral hygiene. "Well," the dragon said in a voice like distant thunder, "this is awkward." Melody blinked. In all her research about potential delivery hazards, nobody had mentioned that dragons were conversationalists. "You can talk," she said stupidly. "I can do many things," the dragon replied, sitting back on its haunches with surprising grace. Though apparently, picking decent sacrifices is not among the local villagers' talents. "Excuse me." The dragon's expression, and Melody was amazed she could read expressions on a reptilian face the size of a small spacecraft, seemed genuinely apologetic. "No offense, but you're completely wrong for this position. I specifically requested a sacrifice with certain qualifications, and you." He gestured with one massive claw. "You're clearly overqualified. Overqualified to be eaten." "Among other things, yes." The dragon's eyes narrowed, studying her with uncomfortable intensity. "You're not from around here, are you? I mean, not from this dimensional plane." Melody stared at him. "I'm from Earth." "Is that a different dimensional plane?" "Oh, my dear girl," the dragon said with what might have been pity. "You have no idea what you've wandered into, do you?" Before Melody could respond, the dragon's form began to shimmer and shift. The golden scales dissolved into patterns of light, the massive body condensing and reshaping until, where the dragon had been, stood a tall humanoid figure with distinctive wing-like appendages and skin that held a faint metallic sheen. "I am Valeric," he said, his voice now merely deeply resonant rather than earth-shaking. "And you, my accidental sacrifice, are in considerably more trouble than being eaten by a dragon." Melody's mind reeled. "You're not actually a dragon." "Perceptive. I'm what your people might call an interdimensional being, currently stranded on this charming but technologically primitive world. The dragon persona helps maintain certain, professional boundaries with the locals." "Professional boundaries?" Valeric gestured toward the cave entrance, where the villagers had apparently decided that extended conversation between sacrifice and sacrificial recipient was a bad omen and had departed for safer territory. I've been monitoring this sector for dimensional anomalies. This planet sits at a particularly interesting confluence of space-time currents, which makes it an excellent observation post and a terrible place to experience engine failure. Engine failure? My ship crashed here several centuries ago. The locals found me, decided I was a deity, and we've maintained a mutually beneficial arrangement ever since. They provide assistance and supplies, I provide protection and the occasional impressive weather phenomenon. Melody looked around the cave, noting what she'd initially taken for treasure was actually sophisticated equipment covered by clever holographic projections. And the sacrifices? Valeric had the decency to look embarrassed. Usually volunteers looking for adventure or outcasts seeking a new start. I relocate them to colonies where their skills are needed. Everyone benefits, no one gets eaten, and the locals maintain their traditional beliefs. It's worked quite well until now. Until now? Until they brought me someone who's been exposed to chronoton radiation, can perceive dimensional variances, and radiates the kind of quantum signature that suggests involvement with forces far beyond this planet's primitive understanding. Melody felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cave's temperature. How can you possibly know about the chronoton exposure? Because, Valeric said gently, you're glowing. Dimensionally speaking. And that signature suggests you've encountered technology that shouldn't exist in this sector of space for at least another 1,000 years. The memory hit her suddenly, the delivery to the Temporal Research Institute, the strange blue flash when she'd handled the package, the brief sensation of existing in multiple moments simultaneously. That was 3 months ago, she whispered. And you've been having strange dreams since then, haven't you? Visions of places that don't exist, people you've never met, technologies beyond current understanding. Melody's blood ran cold. She had indeed been experiencing exactly those dreams, so vivid she'd sometimes awakened unsure of where, or when, she was. What's happening to me? Valeric's expression grew serious. You've been accidentally recruited for something much larger than package delivery. And I'm afraid our chance encounter isn't quite as accidental as it first appeared. He moved to one of his concealed instruments, pressing several controls that caused the cave walls to display what looked like a three-dimensional star map covered in flowing, interconnected lines. This is the dimensional matrix for this sector of space, he explained. Each line represents a probability stream, each intersection a point where different realities touch. Notice anything unusual? Melody studied the display, her enhanced perception picking out patterns that should have been invisible to untrained eyes. There's a convergence point, she said slowly. Right here. This planet. Very good. And that convergence is why my presence here was necessary, why your exposure to chronoton radiation occurred precisely when it did, and why our meeting, while seemingly coincidental, was actually inevitable. You're saying my life has been manipulated? I'm saying the universe has been preparing you for something important, and using me as an unwitting recruitment agent in the process. The implications crashed over Melody like a tidal wave. Her mundane career, her exposure to temporal energies, her arrival on this specific planet at this specific time, none of it had been random. What am I being recruited for? Valeric's wings rustled nervously. That, he said, is what we need to find out. But first, we need to get you off this planet and to someone with the authority to explain what's really happening. And if I refuse? Then you'll spend the rest of your life having increasingly vivid dreams about realities you can't reach and knowledge you can't use, while the chronoton radiation slowly drives you insane. He paused. Also, I'll have to figure out how to fake your death convincingly enough to satisfy the locals, which is more paperwork than I prefer. Melody looked around the cave, at the sophisticated equipment hidden behind primitive facade, at the being who'd revealed his true nature to help her understand the impossible situation she'd stumbled into. Well, she said finally, I suppose my delivery route can spare me for a few days. Where exactly are we going? Valeric smiled, the expression transforming his angular features. To meet some people who've been waiting a very long time to make your acquaintance. And to discover why the universe went to such elaborate lengths to put you exactly where you needed to be. As he began activating what was clearly a spacecraft hidden deeper in the cave, Melody couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. You know, she said, when I woke up this morning, my biggest worry was making sure I had enough fuel to reach the next delivery point. And now? Now I'm apparently on a cosmic recruitment mission I never applied for, traveling with a fake dragon who's actually an interdimensional observer. She shook her head. My job description definitely needs updating. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Melody felt the familiar vibration of a vessel preparing for takeoff. But this time, instead of dread, she felt something suspiciously like anticipation. After all, how many people could say they'd been rejected by a dragon and lived to tell the tale? The interdimensional revelation. The transport vessel that emerged from Valyric's cave bore no resemblance to any ship in Melody's extensive delivery experience. Where human vessels were all practical angles and efficient design, this craft seemed to flow like liquid metal, its surface shifting and adapting to the passage through Drathel's atmosphere. Dimensional phase technology, Valyric explained as they settled into acceleration couches that molded themselves perfectly to their bodies. The ship exists in multiple realities simultaneously, which makes for very smooth rides and extremely confusing customs inspections. Melody watched through the transparent hull as Drathel fell away beneath them, the primitive villages shrinking to dots before disappearing entirely as they broke atmosphere. So where exactly are we going? Recovery Fleet Station Omega-7, Valyric said, his hands dancing over controls that seemed to respond to thought as much as touch. Think of it as interdimensional search and rescue with a mandate to investigate the stranger corners of reality. And they're expecting me? Valyric's expression grew evasive. Let's say they're prepared for the possibility of your arrival. The ship shuddered slightly as they transitioned into what Valyric called interdimensional space, a crystalline tunnel of swirling energy that made Melody's enhanced perception tingle with recognition. She'd seen this before, in her dreams. The chronoton exposure, she realized aloud. It's not just radiation, is it? It's changed how I perceive reality itself. Very good, Valyric approved. Most beings require years of training to recognize dimensional transitions consciously. You're processing it instinctively. They traveled in comfortable silence for a while, Melody absorbing the impossibility of her situation. Just hours ago, her biggest concern had been maintaining her delivery schedule. Now she was hurtling through interdimensional space with a being who'd masqueraded as a dragon for centuries. Can I ask you something? She said eventually. Of course. When you said our meeting wasn't accidental, what did you mean exactly? Valyric's hands stilled on the controls. I've been monitoring probability streams in this sector for over 200 years. Your arrival on Drathel registered as what we call a convergence event, a moment when multiple possibility threads intersect to create significant change. Significant how? The kind of change that affects entire dimensional matrices. The kind that requires very specific individuals to be in very specific places at very specific times. Melody felt a chill. You're saying I was manipulated into coming to Drathel? I'm saying the universe has a way of ensuring certain meetings happen when they need to happen. Your ship developing navigation problems that forced an emergency supply run to Drathel, the locals deciding to hold their sacrifice ceremony 3 days early, my own equipment detecting your quantum signature the moment you entered the system, none of that was coincidence. Then what was it? Destiny, Valyric said simply. Though that's a word most interdimensional operatives prefer to avoid in official reports. The ship began to slow, the crystalline tunnel dissolving around them to reveal their destination. Station Omega-7 was massive, a complex arrangement of interconnected modules that seemed to shift and rotate in patterns that hurt to watch directly. Don't stare at the station's movement patterns, Valyric advised. The architecture exists in 11 dimensions simultaneously. Human perception can only process 3, so your brain will start inventing explanations for what it can't comprehend. 11 dimensions? Melody asked faintly. The universe is considerably more complex than most species realize. Your recent chronoton exposure has enhanced your dimensional awareness, but even enhanced, human consciousness has limits. They docked with a section of the station that seemed to solidify specifically to accommodate their arrival. As they disembarked, Melody was struck by the diversity of beings moving through the corridors, some humanoid, others utterly alien, a few that seemed to exist as pure energy contained in mechanical shells. "Welcome to Recovery Fleet Operations," Valeric said as they walked. "We handle everything from stranded dimensional travelers to reality-threatening anomalies." "And which category do I fall into?" "That," said a new voice, "is precisely what we're here to determine." The speaker was clearly the same species as Valeric, though with markings that suggested higher rank. Her presence radiated the kind of authority that came from making decisions that affected entire civilizations. "Commander Nerissa," Valeric said, inclining his head respectfully. "I present Melody Thornwick, the dimensional anomaly I reported." "Anomaly?" Melody protested. "I'm a delivery person who got kidnapped by primitives." "That's hardly anomalous." Commander Nerissa studied her with eyes that seemed to see far more than they should. "A delivery person who survived chronoton exposure that should have been fatal, who can perceive dimensional variances without training, and whose quantum signature indicates involvement in probability streams that originate outside conventional spacetime." "When you put it like that," Melody admitted, "it does sound somewhat unusual." "Follow me," Nerissa said, leading them deeper into the station. "There are some people who've been waiting to meet you." They traversed corridors that seemed to extend much further than the station's external dimensions should have allowed, past laboratories where technicians worked with equipment that defied every law of physics Melody thought she understood. "How long has this organization existed?" she asked. "The recovery fleet has been operating for approximately 12,000 years, Nerissa replied. "Though our mandate has evolved considerably since the early days of simple rescue operations." "What's your mandate now?" "Preventing the collapse of interdimensional stability," Nerissa said matter-of-factly. "Reality maintenance, if you will." They stopped at a door marked with symbols that seemed to shift and change even as Melody looked at them. "Fair warning," Nerissa said. "What you're about to learn will fundamentally alter your understanding of existence itself. There's no going back to your simple delivery route after this." Melody took a deep breath. "At this point, I think that ship has already sailed." The door opened to reveal a vast chamber dominated by a three-dimensional display showing what appeared to be a web of interconnected light stretching infinitely in all directions. 3 figures stood before it, their forms shifting and indistinct, as if they existed only partially in this dimension. "The Archivists," Valeric whispered. "Beings so old they predate most of the current universe's structure." One of the figures turned toward them, its form solidifying enough for Melody to make out features that were hauntingly beautiful and utterly alien. "Melody Thornwick," it said, its voice echoing from multiple directions simultaneously. "We have been waiting." "Waiting for what exactly?" Melody asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "For the universe to finish preparing you for your actual purpose," the second archivist replied. "Your employment as a delivery specialist was simply vocational training." "Training for what?" The third archivist gestured toward the massive display. "This is the dimensional lattice, the underlying structure that connects all realities across all possible universes. Notice the areas where the pattern appears damaged?" Melody looked closer, her enhanced perception immediately picking out regions where the beautiful web seemed frayed or tangled. "Something's breaking it." "Something has been breaking it for millennia," the first archivist confirmed. "Forces that exist outside conventional reality, entities that feed on dimensional chaos. They create tears in the lattice that spread like cracks in glass." "And eventually?" Melody asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Eventually, the entire structure collapses, taking all connected realities with it," the second archivist said. "Every universe, every timeline, every possibility, gone." "But," the third added, "there are individuals whose unique quantum signatures allow them to perceive and repair these damages." Individuals who can restore the broken harmonies and strengthen the weakened connections. Melody felt the pieces clicking together with awful clarity. You're saying I'm one of these individuals? You are the first we've encountered in over 7 centuries, the first archivist confirmed. Your exposure to chronoton radiation didn't cause your abilities, it merely activated capabilities that were always part of your quantum structure. And my arrival on Drathel was necessary to bring you into contact with Observer Valeric, who was positioned there specifically to identify and recruit beings with your particular talents. Melody turned to look at Valeric, who had the grace to appear somewhat embarrassed. Observer? It's my official title, he admitted. I monitor dimensional anomalies and identify potential recruits for the fleet. So the dragon persona, the centuries of playing deity to primitive villagers, it was all part of your job. Not entirely, Valeric said quickly. I did crash, I was stranded, and the local arrangement did solve practical problems. But yes, I was also positioned to watch for exactly the kind of dimensional signature you carry. Commander Narissa stepped forward. The question now is whether you're willing to accept training in the conscious application of your abilities. What you can do instinctively could be developed into skills capable of repairing the lattice damage. And if I refuse? Then we continue searching for the next individual with compatible quantum markers, the first archivist said. While the damage spreads and the collapse timeline accelerates. How long do we have? At current degradation rates, perhaps 50 years before cascade failure becomes inevitable, the second archivist replied. Melody stared at the vast display, at the visible damage spreading through the beautiful pattern that apparently held all of reality together. And you believe I can fix this? We believe you can learn to fix this, the third archivist corrected. With proper training, equipment, and support. You would not be working alone. What exactly would this training involve? Commander Narissa answered. Learning to consciously perceive and navigate dimensional structures, understanding the nature of quantum harmonics, developing the ability to identify and repair lattice damage. Essentially, becoming an interdimensional engineer with a specialty in reality maintenance. That's quite a career change from package delivery. But not an entirely unrelated skill set, Valeric pointed out. You've spent years ensuring important items reach their proper destinations across dangerous territory. This would simply be ensuring reality reaches its proper destination intact. Melody found herself actually considering it. The scale was overwhelming, the responsibility terrifying, but the alternative, the collapse of all existence, was unthinkable. How long would the training take? Initial certification requires approximately 2 years, Narissa said. Full qualification might take a decade. But you would begin working on minor repairs within months, under supervision. And I'd be based here. Here, on various stations throughout the fleet network, occasionally on specialized mission sites. Your life would be very different from what you've known. Melody looked around the chamber at the beings who had apparently been maneuvering her entire existence toward this moment. Can I have some time to think about it? Of course, the first archivist said. Though we hope you will not take too long. Every day of delay allows the damage to spread further. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Melody turned back for one final look at the dimensional lattice display. The damaged areas seemed more prominent now, like cracks in the foundation of existence itself. Observer Valeric, she said as they walked back through the station's impossible corridors. Yes. When you first saw me on Drathel, when you realized what I was, did you know this would be the result? Valeric was quiet for a long moment. I knew it would change everything, he said finally. For both of us. Both of us? I've been assigned as your initial training supervisor, should you accept the position. Apparently, my expertise in dimensional observation makes me qualified to help develop your lattice repair abilities. Melody couldn't help but smile. So the fake dragon becomes my teacher in reality maintenance? Stranger partnerships have saved the universe, Valeric replied solemnly, though his eyes held a glint of humor. As they reached the guest quarters where Melody would be staying while making her decision, she realized that despite the overwhelming nature of everything she'd learned, she felt oddly at peace. Perhaps this was what she'd been unconsciously searching for all along, not just a job, but a purpose. Not just destinations to reach, but a reality to preserve. Ancient secrets unveiled. 3 days of reviewing training materials and technical specifications had left Melody's head spinning with concepts that challenged everything she thought she knew about reality. Dimensional harmonics, quantum lattice theory, probability stream navigation, it was like learning an entirely new language where every word redefined the universe itself. She was studying in her quarters when the alert came through the station's communication system: priority rescue mission. All available personnel report to briefing room 7 immediately. Melody looked up from her quantum mechanics primer, confused. She wasn't technically fleet personnel yet, but Valeric had mentioned that training often involved observing actual operations. She found him already suiting up in the preparation bay, checking equipment that looked far more advanced than anything she'd seen during her delivery career. "What's happening?" she asked. "Remember the archivists mentioned that you weren't the first being they'd identified with lattice repair capabilities?" Valeric said, securing a device that hummed with barely contained energy to his belt. "They said there hadn't been anyone for 7 centuries. "Correct. But that doesn't mean the others simply disappeared. We've just received a distress signal from a ship that's been missing for over 7,000 years, a vessel carrying 3 individuals with quantum signatures similar to yours." Melody felt a chill. "They've been lost for 7,000 years. "Not lost," Commander Narissa said, joining them in the preparation bay. "Trapped. The ship appears to have been caught in a dimensional loop, existing in a state of temporal suspension. We're only detecting it now because the loop is finally beginning to destabilize." "And you want me to observe the rescue?" "We want you to participate," Narissa corrected. "Your ability to perceive dimensional anomalies may be crucial to safely extracting them from whatever trap they're caught in." An hour later, Melody found herself aboard another recovery fleet vessel, this one configured specifically for interdimensional rescue operations. The ship's bridge was a marvel of technology that seemed to anticipate its operators' needs, displays shifting and adapting based on whoever was looking at them. "Target acquired," the navigation officer announced. "Distance, approximately 47 dimensional layers from baseline reality." Through the main view screen, Melody could see their destination, a ship that seemed to flicker in and out of existence, its form shifting between multiple possible configurations simultaneously. "It's caught in a probability cascade," Valeric explained. "Unable to settle into a single-dimensional state. The occupants are alive, but experiencing all possible versions of their fate simultaneously." "That sounds unpleasant," Melody said. "It's a form of existence most minds cannot sustain indefinitely. If we don't extract them soon, they'll fragment across dimensions permanently." The rescue ship maneuvered closer, and Melody gasped as her enhanced perception kicked in. She could see the streams of probability surrounding the trapped vessel, the tangled web of causality that held it suspended between realities. "I can see the pattern," she said suddenly. "It's not random, there's a structure to how it's trapped." Commander Narissa turned toward her sharply. "What kind of structure?" Melody concentrated, letting her new abilities focus on the dimensional anomaly. "It's like a knot in the lattice itself. Something that twisted the normal flow of probability into a self-sustaining loop. Can you see a way to untangle it?" Melody studied the pattern more closely, her perception picking out individual threads in the complex weave. "Maybe. There's a sequence to how the probabilities interconnect. If we could disrupt the pattern at specific points." "Show us," Narissa commanded. Working with the ship's advanced sensors, Melody began identifying the critical junctions in the probability trap. It was delicate work. One wrong move could collapse the entire structure and scatter the trapped ship's atoms across a dozen dimensions. "There," she said finally, highlighting specific coordinates on the tactical display. "If we can apply precisely calibrated dimensional pulses to these 7 points simultaneously, the loop should unravel safely." The rescue team worked with the precision of beings who had performed impossible tasks as routine operations. Energy beams lanced out from their ship, striking the highlighted coordinates with mathematical accuracy. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the flickering ship began to solidify, its uncertain existence resolving into a single, stable configuration. Life signs confirmed, the medical officer reported. 3 individuals, all in stasis. Vital signs are stable, but they'll need careful revival procedures. As they brought the ancient ship aboard their vessel, Melody felt an odd sense of recognition. The ship's design was unlike anything in the fleet's databases, yet something about its configuration felt familiar. The occupants are awakening, the medical officer announced. But they're asking for someone called the Harmony Breaker. Melody froze. They're asking for what? The Harmony Breaker, the officer repeated. They seem to believe this person was instrumental in their rescue. Valeric and Commander Narissa exchanged meaningful glances. That's what the archivists called you, Valeric said quietly. During your initial evaluation. I thought it was simply a translation error. Apparently not, Narissa said grimly. Bring them to conference room 1. And summon the archivists. This situation just became significantly more complex. The 3 rescued individuals were unlike any beings Melody had encountered. Tall and ethereal, they moved with the fluid grace of creatures who existed as much in dimensional space as in physical reality. Their eyes held the weight of eons, yet when they looked at Melody, their expressions brightened with unmistakable recognition. The Harmony Breaker, the first one said, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated in dimensions Melody couldn't see. We have waited so long. You know me? Melody asked, confusion evident in her voice. We know what you represent, the second being replied. The one who perceives the flaws in false patterns, who breaks discordant harmonies to reveal truth beneath. The third being stepped forward, its form shimmering with contained energy. We are the predecessors, the first to develop lattice repair capabilities. We have been held in temporal suspension, waiting for the pattern to complete itself. What pattern? Commander Narissa demanded. The first predecessor gestured, and the air above the conference table filled with a 3-dimensional display similar to what the archivists had shown Melody, but far more detailed. The corruption, it said simply. The force that damages the dimensional lattice is not random, it is directed, purposeful, intelligent. We discovered this truth 7,000 years ago and were trapped while attempting to warn others. Trapped by what? Valeric asked. By the corruption itself, the second predecessor replied. It perceived our discovery as a threat and sought to eliminate us. We managed to escape into temporal suspension, but only by accepting exile from normal time. The third predecessor's attention remained fixed on Melody. But the pattern was established even then. The corruption's victory was temporary, eventually, one would arise who could perceive its true nature and develop countermeasures. And you believe I'm this person? We know you are, the first predecessor said with absolute certainty. Your quantum signature resonates with the lattice damage in ways that reveal the corruption's artificial nature. You can see what we discovered, that the tears in reality are not random failures but deliberate attacks. Melody felt the pieces of an enormous puzzle clicking together in her mind. You're saying something is actively destroying the dimensional lattice. Something vast, ancient, and utterly hostile to ordered reality, the second predecessor confirmed. It exists in the spaces between dimensions, feeding on chaos and confusion. Every tear it creates in the lattice weakens the barriers that keep it contained. And if it breaks free? It won't just destroy the multiverse, the third predecessor said grimly. It will remake it in its own image, a realm of pure chaos where no stable reality can exist. The implications were staggering. Everything Melody had learned about lattice repair suddenly took on new urgency. They weren't just maintaining reality, they were fighting a war against something that sought to unmake existence itself. How do we fight something like that? She asked. By doing what you were born to do, the first predecessor replied. By perceiving the true patterns beneath false ones, by breaking the discordant harmonies it creates to disguise its attacks. The corruption has spent millennia learning to hide its activities, the second added. It creates tiers that appear to be natural lattice failures, probability distortions that seem like random fluctuations. Only someone with your unique perceptual abilities can distinguish its deliberate attacks from genuine system failures. Which means, Commander Narissa said slowly, that most of our repair efforts have been addressing symptoms rather than the actual source of the damage. Exactly, the third predecessor confirmed. You have been fighting a defensive action against an enemy you couldn't see. The first archivist materialized in the conference room, its form more solid than Melody had ever seen it. The predecessors speak truth, it announced. We have long suspected that the lattice damage followed patterns too deliberate to be natural, but we lacked the means to prove it. And now? Melody asked. Now we have you, the archivist replied. And we have confirmation from those who witnessed the corruption's activities firsthand. The second predecessor stepped forward, its ancient eyes focusing on Melody with intensity that made her quantum signature tingle. There is more you must understand. The corruption does not work alone, it has agents, beings from various realities who have been corrupted by exposure to its influence. Corrupted how? Valeric asked. They lose the ability to perceive true patterns, the third predecessor explained. Instead, they see only what the corruption wants them to see. They become unknowing servants, creating tiers in the lattice while believing they are performing beneficial work. Melody felt a chill of understanding. How many of these corrupted agents might be working within the recovery fleet itself? The uncomfortable silence that followed her question was answer enough. We have suspected infiltration for centuries, Commander Narissa admitted. But without proof, and without the ability to distinguish corrupted individuals from legitimate personnel. I might be able to help with that, Melody said slowly. If I can perceive the corruption's influence on the lattice, I might be able to see its effects on individuals as well. The first predecessor smiled, an expression both beautiful and terrible on its ethereal features. Precisely why we waited for you, Harmony Breaker. You will not only repair the damage, you will identify the source and neutralize the threat. But first, the second archivist said, materializing beside its colleague, she must be trained to safely approach corruption-tainted areas. Direct exposure to its influence can be overwhelming even for someone with her abilities. How long will this training take? Melody asked. That depends, the third predecessor replied, on how quickly you can learn to trust what you see rather than what you expect to see. The corruption's greatest weapon is its ability to make chaos appear as order, destruction as creation. As the meeting concluded and plans were made for Melody's advanced training, she found herself walking the station's corridors with Valeric, trying to process everything she'd learned. 7,000 years, she said finally. Those beings waited 7,000 years in temporal suspension for me to exist. The universe operates on scales that dwarf individual lifespans, Valeric replied. What seems like an impossibly long wait to us might be merely a brief delay in cosmic terms. And you? How long have you been waiting on Drathel for me to show up? Valeric was quiet for a moment. I've been monitoring that sector for 2 centuries. But I only became aware I was waiting for someone specific about 50 years ago, when the probability streams began converging on a single focal point. 50 years of playing dragon to primitive villagers, just on the chance that someday the right person would be delivered to you as a sacrifice. When you put it like that, it does sound rather elaborate, Valeric admitted. But interdimensional operations often require patience measured in centuries rather than years. They paused at an observation deck where the station's impossible architecture provided a view of the dimensional crossroads outside. Streams of probability and causality flowed past like cosmic rivers, occasionally intersecting in patterns that created brief glimpses of other realities. Are you ready for this? Valeric asked. What we're asking of you, it's going to be dangerous in ways we can't fully predict. Melody watched the flow of dimensions outside the station, her enhanced perception picking out details in the cosmic dance that few beings could see. I was a delivery person whose biggest worry was avoiding asteroid fields, she said. Now I'm apparently the key to preventing the corruption and destruction of all reality. Ready seems like an inadequate word. But I can see the damage, she said simply. I can see what's being destroyed, what we stand to lose if the corruption succeeds. And I can see patterns that suggest solutions might be possible. Then you'll accept the training? Melody turned from the impossible view outside to meet his eyes. I'll accept more than the training. I'll accept the responsibility. The universe went to considerable trouble to put me in this position. Who am I to argue with cosmic planning? Valeric smiled, the expression transforming his angular features. The fake dragon is proud of his rejected sacrifice. The rejected sacrifice is grateful to her fake dragon, Melody replied. Even if you did manipulate my entire life to get me here. Not manipulated, Valeric corrected gently. Guided. There's a difference. Is there? Manipulation removes choice. Guidance simply ensures you have the information needed to make the right choice when the moment comes. As they prepared to return to their quarters, Melody took one last look at the dimensional streams flowing past the station. Somewhere in that cosmic tapestry was the corruption, working to unravel everything she could see. But for the first time since learning of her true purpose, she felt genuinely confident. She had been trained by necessity to navigate dangerous routes and deliver important packages to their proper destinations. This was simply the most important delivery of her career, ensuring that reality itself reached its proper destination intact. The Dimensional Lattice. 6 months of intensive training had transformed Melody's understanding of reality so completely that she sometimes wondered if the person who had once delivered packages across mundane space routes had been someone else entirely. Under the guidance of the predecessors and the archivists, she had learned to perceive not just the surface patterns of dimensional space, but the deep structures that held the multiverse together. Today, however, would be her first real test. The site we're approaching, Commander Narissa explained as their specialized ship approached what appeared to be empty space, is one of the most severely damaged regions in the local dimensional matrix. Previous repair attempts have not only failed, they've made the damage worse. Through the ship's advanced sensors, Melody could see what the commander meant. Where the dimensional lattice should have been a beautiful, interconnected web of probability and causality, there was instead a twisted knot of broken connections and chaotic energy patterns. It looks like someone took a perfect piece of fabric and deliberately shredded it, Melody observed. An apt analogy, the first predecessor agreed from its position at the sensor array. But look closer, do you see the underlying pattern in the destruction? Melody focused her enhanced perception on the damaged region, letting her awareness sink deeper into the quantum structures. At first, she saw only chaos, broken lattice connections, probability streams flowing in impossible directions, regions where cause and effect had become completely disconnected. But gradually, a pattern began to emerge. The damage wasn't random, it followed subtle geometric principles, creating weak points that would propagate failure throughout the surrounding lattice if left unchecked. It's designed, she said, feeling a chill of understanding. The corruption isn't just breaking things randomly, it's engineering cascade failures. Precisely, the second predecessor confirmed. Each damaged region it creates weakens the lattice's overall stability, making it easier to create larger tiers elsewhere. And if we simply repair the obvious damage without addressing the underlying pattern? Melody asked. The repairs fail within months, Commander Narissa said grimly. We've learned this through bitter experience. The third predecessor activated a display showing the historical record of repair attempts in this region. 27 separate missions over the past 4 centuries. Each time, the fleet's best technicians restored the lattice connections, only to watch them unravel again. Because they were fighting the symptoms instead of the disease, Melody realized. The corruption's pattern is still there, hidden beneath the apparent damage. Which is why we need you, the first archivist said, materializing beside the ship's command station. Your ability to perceive true patterns beneath false ones is the key to identifying and neutralizing the corruption's influence. As their ship took position within the damaged region, Melody felt the chaotic energies surrounding them pressing against her consciousness like a persistent headache. This close to actively corrupted lattice, even her enhanced perception struggled to maintain coherence. "Remember your training," Valeric said quietly from the pilot's station. "Don't fight what you're seeing, let your natural perception guide you to the truth beneath the chaos." Melody closed her eyes and extended her awareness into the damaged lattice. The sensation was like diving into a whirlpool of broken possibilities, each fractured probability stream pulling her consciousness in different directions. But underneath the chaos, she began to sense something else. A presence. Cold, ancient, and utterly malevolent. "It's still here," she whispered. "The corruption, it's not just damage it left behind. Part of it is still actively present in this region." The predecessors exchanged alarmed glances. "That should not be possible," the second said. "Our sensors detect no active dimensional intrusions." "Your sensors can't see what I'm seeing," Melody replied, opening her eyes. "There's something hiding in the spaces between the lattice connections, something that doesn't exist in normal dimensional space." She moved to the ship's primary console, her hands dancing over controls that seemed to respond to her intentions as much as her actions. The main display shifted to show her perception of the damaged region, revealing patterns invisible to conventional sensors. "There," she said, highlighting areas where the lattice damage formed subtle geometric configurations. "The corruption isn't gone, it's woven itself into the structure of the damage. Every time someone tries to repair the lattice, they're actually reinforcing the corruption's influence." "How is that possible?" Commander Narissa demanded. "By making the repairs themselves carry traces of corrupted pattern," the third predecessor said with dawning horror. "The healing energy becomes a vector for spreading the influence to other regions. Which explains why damage has been accelerating despite our best efforts," the first archivist observed. "We have been unknowingly serving as the corruption's agents." Melody studied the hidden patterns more closely, her perception picking out the intricate web of influence that connected this damaged region to dozens of others throughout the dimensional matrix. "It's worse than that," she said grimly. "This site isn't just a damaged area, it's a distribution node. The corruption is using it to coordinate attacks on lattice structure throughout this entire sector of space." The implications were staggering. The recovery fleet had been operating for millennia under the assumption that they were fighting random damage and natural decay. Instead, they had been facing a coordinated campaign by an intelligence that understood dimensional mechanics better than they did. "Can you neutralize it?" Valeric asked. "I think so," Melody replied, though uncertainty colored her voice. "But it's going to require doing something that goes against every safety protocol you've taught me." "What do you mean?" Commander Narissa asked sharply. "I need to make direct contact with the corruption's presence in this region. Touch the pattern directly with my consciousness and unweave it from the inside." "Absolutely not," the first predecessor said immediately. "Direct contact with concentrated corruption influence could shatter your mind completely." "But indirect methods won't work," Melody argued. "The corruption has woven itself too deeply into the lattice structure. Any external repair attempt will only strengthen its influence." "There must be another way," Valeric insisted. "Maybe," Melody admitted. "But while we're looking for safer alternatives, the corruption is using this node to damage lattice structure throughout the sector. How many realities will collapse while we're being cautious?" The ship's communication system crackled to life. "Fleet Command to Rescue 7, came an urgent voice. We're receiving cascade failure alerts from 17 sectors simultaneously. Whatever's happening in your region, it's affecting the entire local matrix." Melody looked around at the beings who had trained her, guided her, and brought her to this moment. "The decision is mine to make," she said quietly. "This is why I was trained, why the universe spent so much effort putting me in this position. I have to try." "If you're determined to proceed," the second predecessor said reluctantly, "at least allow us to establish protective barriers around your consciousness. We cannot prevent the contact, but we might be able to limit the damage if something goes wrong." Do it, Melody agreed. The next several minutes were spent preparing defenses that operated on principles of quantum mechanics she was only beginning to understand. Psychic barriers, probability shields, consciousness anchors, layers of protection designed to preserve the core of her identity no matter what happened during contact with the corruption. Ready? Commander Narissa asked. Melody took a deep breath and extended her awareness toward the hidden presence she could sense lurking within the lattice damage. The contact, when it came, was like touching the heart of entropy itself. Who dares? The voice that filled her mind was vast, ancient, and utterly alien. Who dares to perceive the truth behind the false patterns? I am the Harmony Breaker, Melody replied, drawing strength from the title the archivists had given her. And I'm here to repair what you've damaged. Repair? The presence seemed amused. Child, you understand nothing. I do not damage, I reveal. I show the chaos that underlies all order, the inevitable entropy that awaits all structured systems. You're destroying realities, Melody accused. I am freeing them, the corruption replied. Freeing them from the tyranny of pattern, the prison of causality. In chaos, all possibilities exist simultaneously. In order, only a few survive. As they communicated, Melody began to understand the true nature of what she faced. The corruption wasn't simply destructive, it was a fundamental philosophical opponent to the idea of structured reality itself. It genuinely believed that chaos was preferable to order, that the multiverse would be better off without the limitations imposed by dimensional stability. But she could also see its weakness. For all its power and ancient wisdom, the corruption was ultimately a creature of chaos. It could create disorder, but it couldn't truly understand the patterns it destroyed. That understanding was limited to beings like herself, those who could perceive both order and chaos and choose between them. You cannot stop me, the corruption said as Melody began to trace the connections between its presence and the lattice damage. I am eternal. I was here before your structured realities existed, and I will remain when they have all collapsed into blessed entropy. Maybe, Melody replied, her consciousness following the geometric patterns that held the corruption's influence in place. But right now, in this moment, I can see exactly how you've woven yourself into this lattice node. And I can unweave it. Impossible. The pattern is too complex, too deeply integrated. You would have to perceive the true structure beneath the false one, Melody finished. Break the discordant harmony to reveal genuine pattern. Yes, I know. It's what I do. With surgical precision born of months of training and natural ability refined by necessity, Melody began to separate the corruption's influence from the legitimate lattice structure. It was like performing surgery on the fabric of reality itself. One wrong move could collapse the entire region into dimensional chaos. But gradually, connection by connection, she unraveled the malevolent pattern that had been using this node to spread damage throughout the sector. The corruption fought her every step of the way, trying to confuse her perception and redirect her efforts into creating new damage. You think you have won, it hissed as its influence was finally expelled from the lattice node. But I have 1,000 other nodes, 1,000,000 other patterns. You cannot be everywhere at once. I don't need to be, Melody replied as the last of the corruption's presence was banished from the region. I just need to teach others to see what I see. The moment the corruption's influence was completely removed, the damaged lattice began repairing itself. Without the malevolent pattern holding the breaks open, the natural healing properties of dimensional space reasserted themselves. Cascade failures have stopped, came the report from Fleet Command. All affected sectors are showing rapid improvement. Melody opened her eyes to find the ship's crew staring at her in amazement. Where the twisted knot of broken reality had been, the lattice now showed clean, healthy connections extending in all directions. How do you feel? Valeric asked, concern evident in his voice. Tired, Melody admitted. But whole. The protective barriers worked, I'm still me. And the corruption? Commander Narissa inquired. Gone from this node, but it was telling the truth about having others. This was just one battle in a much larger war. Melody looked around at her colleagues and teachers. But now we know how to fight that war effectively. And we know that it can be won. The first predecessor approached her, its ancient features showing something that might have been pride. You have done what we could only dream of, Harmony Breaker. You have proven that the corruption can be defeated. Not defeated, Melody corrected. Countered. As long as the multiverse exists, there will always be forces that seek to return it to chaos. But there will also be those who choose to preserve order and meaning. As their ship began the journey back to Station Omega 7, Melody found herself looking forward to the next phase of her improbable career. She had work to do, corrupted nodes to cleanse, others to train in perceiving true patterns, a war to fight for the very existence of structured reality. It was a far cry from delivering packages, but the core principle remained the same, ensuring that important things reached their proper destinations safely. Accepting destiny. 1 year after her first successful cleansing of a corruption node, Melody stood before the assembled leadership of the recovery fleet at their most secure facility, a station that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously and served as headquarters for operations spanning the entire known multiverse. The past 12 months had been a whirlwind of activity. She had successfully cleansed 47 corrupted lattice nodes, trained a dozen other beings with similar perceptual abilities, and helped develop new protocols for identifying corruption influence before it could establish deep roots in dimensional structure. But today's briefing was different. Today, they would be discussing the next phase of the war against entropy itself. Status report, Commander Narissa requested as the assembled beings took their positions around the conference hologram. Corruption activity has decreased by 63% in sectors where we've implemented the new detection protocols, reported the fleet's chief analyst. However, we're detecting increased activity in regions beyond our current operational range. It's adapting, Melody observed, studying the tactical display. Learning from our successes and shifting its efforts to areas where we're less likely to detect the damage until it's well established. The first archivist materialized at the head of the conference table. Which brings us to today's primary agenda item. The corruption's retreat to distant sectors presents both an opportunity and a challenge. Opportunity how? Asked one of the fleet commanders. If we can strike at multiple distant nodes simultaneously, we might be able to disrupt its entire network, the second predecessor explained. Force it to abandon its coordinated approach and revert to random destructive acts. And the challenge? Melody asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The distances involved require establishing permanent outposts in sectors we've never fully explored, Commander Narissa replied. We'd be operating beyond our supply lines, beyond immediate support, in regions where dimensional physics might not work the way we expect. Deep space interdimensional operations, Valeric summarized. The kind of missions that make dragon impersonation look simple by comparison. Melody studied the display showing the corruption's estimated network structure. Red nodes indicated confirmed corrupted sites, yellow showed probable locations, and vast areas of unmarked space suggested regions where they simply had no information at all. How many teams would we need to deploy simultaneously to make this work? She asked. At minimum, 12 strike teams operating in coordinated fashion across 4-dimensional sectors, the chief analyst replied. Each team would need someone with your level of perceptual ability to identify and neutralize corruption influences. And how many people do we have with my level of ability? The uncomfortable silence that followed her question was answer enough. We have yourself, the first predecessor said finally, 3 others who show significant potential but require more training, and perhaps a dozen who demonstrate basic sensitivity but would need years of development. Not enough, Melody concluded. Not for simultaneous operations across multiple sectors. Which is why, the second archivist said, materializing beside its colleague, we must consider more dramatic solutions. Such as consciousness duplication, the third predecessor said. Creating quantum echoes of your awareness that could operate independently while maintaining connection to your core perception abilities. Melody felt a chill at the suggestion. You're talking about splitting my consciousness into multiple parts. Not splitting, the first archivist corrected. Extending. Creating resonant copies that share your essential capabilities while maintaining individual autonomy. Is that even possible? The theory is sound, Commander Narissa admitted. But it's never been attempted on the scale we're discussing. The risks are significant. What kind of risks? Valeric asked, his protective instincts clearly activated. Consciousness fragmentation, quantum decoherence, the possibility that the copies might develop independent agendas that conflict with the original, the second predecessor listed grimly. Or that the process itself might damage the original consciousness beyond repair. But if it works? Melody asked. We could deploy coordinated strikes across the entire corruption network simultaneously, the chief analyst said. Potentially ending this war in a single, decisive campaign. Melody walked to the observation window, looking out at the impossible vista of 17-dimensional space surrounding the station. In the distance, she could see the flowing patterns of the dimensional lattice itself, the vast web that connected all realities and made structured existence possible. There's another option, she said slowly. What do you mean? Commander Narissa inquired. Instead of creating copies of myself to fight the corruption's network, what if we could turn the network against itself? The assembled beings exchanged puzzled glances. Explain, the first archivist requested. The corruption operates through geometric patterns woven into lattice damage, right? Each node connects to others through specific dimensional pathways that allow coordinated activity. Correct, the second predecessor confirmed. And I've learned to trace those connections, to follow the patterns from one node to another during cleansing operations. Yes, but following the connections is different from using them for active operations, the third predecessor pointed out. What if it isn't? Melody turned back to face the group. What if, instead of trying to be in multiple places at once, I could send cleansing patterns along the corruption's own network? Use its connections against it. The idea hung in the air for a moment as the implications sank in. You're proposing to weaponize the healing process, Valeric realized. Turn lattice repair into a contagious effect that spreads through corrupted regions automatically. Essentially, yes. Create a counter-pattern that would propagate through the corruption's network the same way its malevolent influence spreads through healthy lattice. The theoretical framework is elegant, the first archivist acknowledged. But the practical challenges would be enormous. You'd need to maintain conscious control over the healing pattern as it spread across dozens of dimensional sectors simultaneously. And if something went wrong, the second predecessor added, the healing pattern could become as destructive as the corruption itself. Unchecked order can be just as chaotic as unchecked entropy. But if it worked? Commander Narissa pressed. If it worked, Melody said, we could cleanse the entire network in a matter of hours instead of years. End the war not through overwhelming force, but through elegant solution. The discussion that followed was intense and technical, involving quantum mechanics principles that strained even Melody's enhanced understanding. But gradually, a plan began to emerge. They would modify the primary lattice interface at station Omega 7 to allow Melody to simultaneously connect with multiple corrupted nodes. Instead of cleansing them individually, she would create a master healing pattern that could propagate through the corruption's own network connections. The risks remain substantial, the chief analyst warned as they finalized the proposal. Consciousness overload, pattern collapse, the possibility that the corruption might detect and counter the attack before it can complete. And if we do nothing? Melody asked. How long before the corruption establishes new nodes faster than we can cleanse existing ones? Current projections suggest we reach equilibrium, a stalemate, within 18 months, Commander Narissa replied. After that, the corruption begins to gain ground again. Then we take the risk, Melody decided. When do we begin? The modifications to the lattice interface will require 2 weeks, the first predecessor said. Are you certain about this course of action? Melody looked around the conference room at the beings who had become her colleagues, teachers, and friends. A year ago, I was a delivery person whose biggest worry was navigating asteroid fields. Now I'm proposing to conduct lattice surgery on a multiverse-spanning scale. Certain seems like a relative term. But you're willing to try? Valeric asked. I'm willing to do what needs to be done, Melody replied. This war has to end, and I'm apparently the only one positioned to end it. The universe went to considerable trouble to put me here, I intend to finish what it started. 2 weeks later, Melody stood in the modified lattice interface chamber, surrounded by equipment that existed in more dimensions than her unenhanced consciousness could fully perceive. Through the quantum connections, she could sense the vast network of corruption nodes spread across distant sectors of space. All systems ready, the chief technician reported. Quantum anchors are stable, consciousness buffers are active, emergency disconnection protocols are standing by. Remember, Commander Narissa said through the communication system, if you encounter any indication that the pattern is becoming unstable, abort immediately. We can find another way. Understood, Melody replied, though they all knew that if this attempt failed, there might not be time to develop another solution. She closed her eyes and extended her awareness through the lattice interface, feeling her consciousness expand across dimensional boundaries to touch the corrupted nodes simultaneously. The sensation was like being in a dozen places at once while remaining anchored in her own identity. One by one, she began to identify the specific pattern signatures of each corrupted node, tracing the connections that linked them into a malevolent network. The corruption had indeed grown more sophisticated since their first encounter, the patterns were more subtle, the connections better hidden. But they were still there, and she could still see them. You again, came the familiar presence of the corruption as it detected her activity. Still playing with forces beyond your understanding. I understand enough, Melody replied, beginning to weave the master healing pattern that would propagate through the network connections. I understand that you're afraid. Afraid? I am entropy itself. I am the inevitable end of all ordered systems. You're afraid that order might be stronger than chaos, Melody continued, her consciousness tracing pathways between distant nodes while simultaneously constructing the counterpattern. Afraid that meaning might be more powerful than meaninglessness. Impossible. Chaos is the natural state. Order is the aberration. Then why are you working so hard to destroy it? Melody asked as she completed the master pattern and prepared to release it into the network. If order is truly unnatural, it should collapse on its own. The moment of silence that followed told her she had struck home. The corruption's entire philosophy was based on a fundamental contradiction: if chaos was truly superior, it wouldn't need to actively destroy order to prove its dominance. She released the healing pattern. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. The master pattern raced through the network connections faster than thought, reaching corrupted nodes across dozens of dimensional sectors simultaneously. Each node it touched began to heal, its malevolent influence dissolving as the true lattice structure reasserted itself. What have you done? The corruption demanded, its presence beginning to fragment as its network collapsed. I've shown the multiverse what it looks like when someone chooses order over chaos, Melody replied. When someone decides that meaning is worth preserving. The healing wave continued to propagate, reaching even the most distant nodes in the network. Where corrupted influence had twisted probability and causality into knots of entropy, clean lattice connections now flowed in harmonious patterns. This is not over, the corruption said as its presence faded from the network. I am eternal. I will find other ways, other patterns. Maybe, Melody agreed. But now there are others who can see what I see, who can recognize your influence and counter it. You're no longer fighting in secret. As the last corrupted node was cleansed and the healing pattern completed its work, Melody felt her consciousness snap back to the interface chamber like a rubber band released under tension. Status report. Commander Narissa demanded immediately. Network cleansed, Melody said, though her voice was weak with exhaustion. All nodes purified, connections restored. The corruption's coordinated network has been completely dismantled. The celebration that followed was subdued but genuine. They had won a significant victory, but everyone understood that the war between order and chaos was far from over. Later, as Melody recovered in the station's medical bay, Valeric sat beside her bed with an expression of mixed pride and concern. "So what happens now?" he asked. "The fleet will want to expand operations, establish permanent monitoring stations, train more individuals with your abilities." "Good," Melody said. "The universe needs defenders who can see through false patterns to underlying truth. And you? What's next for the former delivery person who saved the multiverse?" Melody smiled, feeling more at peace than she had since this entire adventure began. "I think I'll keep doing what I've always done, making sure important things reach their proper destinations safely. Even though those things now include the fundamental stability of reality itself." "Especially because of that," Melody replied. "Some deliveries are more important than others." As she drifted off to sleep, surrounded by beings who had become her chosen family, Melody reflected on the strange journey that had brought her from rejected dragon sacrifice to defender of dimensional order. The universe had indeed gone to considerable trouble to put her exactly where she needed to be. And while she knew there would always be new challenges, new threats to the delicate balance that made structured existence possible, she also knew she was exactly where she belonged. After all, she had always been good at her job. The job description had just gotten a little more complicated. In the depths of interdimensional space, far from any inhabited reality, something that had once been pure entropy stirred with frustrated rage. The corruption had been defeated, its network dismantled, its grand design for chaos thwarted by a single being who could see truth beneath illusion. But entropy was patient. It had existed before the first stars formed and would exist after the last black holes evaporated. Somewhere, sometime, in some corner of the vast multiverse, opportunity would arise again. And when it did, the corruption would be ready. But so, now, would those who stood for order. The harmony breakers, for there would be others trained in Melody's techniques, would be watching, waiting, ready to perceive false patterns and break discordant harmonies wherever they appeared. The war between chaos and meaning would continue, as it always had, as it always would. But now both sides fought with full knowledge of what was at stake, and what was possible. In the end, that might be victory enough. The end.